Blended.org.uk is a new website and programme of support for the teachers around the pedagogy of blended learning. Now, this has been supported by IBM, and IBM are actually a long-standing partner of the Connected Learning Centre, and our collaboration goes back to, I think, 20 years ago. They supported us in a programme which was actually around family learning and working with parents and children together and supporting parents' digital skills. We've also done things like an ongoing annual robotics competition where 100 children go to IBM HQ on the South Bank, and we've done lots of professional development with IBM as well. So last summer we had some conversations with them around the need for teachers in the school sector, particularly to really sort of be thinking more about blended learning as we understood it pre-pandemic, in terms of that kind of using digital in the best way we can, but also as we've understood it since the pandemic in terms of that real mixture of face-to-face classroom and the kind of moving between the kind of the fully online remote learning, and then kind of back and forth into class, bubbles in and out, etc. So we weren't expecting that actually at the point that we would launch the programme that we would be back in lockdown again, with the majority of children and young people in the country being back to remote learning, much of it online, but that is the case. So, as I say, kind of at the heart of it is really about kind of the pedagogy of blended learning, and we've come up with this graphic around our core principles of remote learning. So we're now moving from the kind of we're moving to the kind of subset of blended learning to remote learning. So we have been drawing with colleagues from the charity that we work for, Education Development Trust, looking at the work of Garrison and Anderson in Canada. So thinking about, teacher presence and belonging and how you develop a community of inquiry and dialogue, and how you design learning for remote and how you get engagement with peers. And we've been working with Mark Martin, who is a teacher we've worked with for many years, also known on Twitter as Urban Teacher. And every week, Mark has been doing a video, like a sort of provocation and tips and ideas based on those kind of 6 principles. So that's what we've done in this kind of initial first few weeks of the blended programme. And what we very much wanted to do is kind of also have it as a place for teacher voice and educator voice, school leader voice, and to hear the stories, the amazing learning that's happened in this past year. So, some of that is kind of some of that is tool specific, some of that is about well-being, mostly it is about the kind of pedagogy and the thinking and the learning design. So we've got these little mini clips, like really sort of short clips of teachers talking about their experience. We've also got lots of resources on there. We've kind of tried to curate what we think is useful. And we've also got a section which is kind of live webinars, such as today, and also on-demand learning. So, and some of those that, we're thinking kind of micro learning. So what's going to be really useful for teachers in terms of thinking about blended learning, and particularly at the moment, the kind of the remote learning. So, for example, this little like mini course was from an interview we did with a teacher who was really thinking about use of questions in her online learning, and we were able to kind of use that interview and then kind of make it into this little mini course. And then we've also done things like sort of interview different people. So I did an interview a few weeks ago with Tony Bates in Ontario, who has written a lot of books about online learning and distance education, and he's done a series of blogs recently. So I interviewed him about that and his reflections on what has happened in terms of online learning in the school sector, and then we'll be making that into a short course. So we're trying to approach this in lots of different ways. So having that teacher voice, having expertise, having little bits of micro learning, and having it as a community of practice. And there's also going to be a section there, a space that's actually wider, that's going to be about European educators, and IBM are very keen that all of their corporate social responsibility leads across Europe are working together with education organisations, ministries of education, partners, to really also pull together those amazing stories from across Europe. So we want this to be very much a kind of a place where we're all having conversations about this amazing period of learning.
Marin, I've got a hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin, and thanks, Sarah. That sounds really interesting. I'd love to expand a little bit on, how does this relate to kind of the challenges that that you see, that also Sheila has kind of brought up today, and what do you think might be, the next step in where blended is going to go?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question, because I think we are, as Sheila set out so clearly, we're in this extraordinary position of having now this experience and this learning and this opportunity to go forward and do something differently. And I guess one of the things is going to be and this is thinking very much in the kind of the kind of school sector, because teachers have been using digital in a very kind of adept way, they've broken down learning differently. So then how is that going to influence what they do when they go back to kind of majority face-to-face classroom-based learning, and how might they be using digital? So I think we want very much to be kind of reflecting those questions and that journey, and also influencing. So thinking, okay, right, what do we know has actually worked really well? We're thinking about things like, as Sheila said, about rethinking assessment, rethinking questioning and dialogue and teacher presence and all of those things. It's made us have to be more explicit, I think, in our learning design, and so that's a real opportunity going forward. As we continue this blended programme into this next stage of education.
I think I'd add to that as well, Sarah, that one of the interesting series of conversations that we've been having is actually kind of cross educator and cross stage, and that actually one of the things that the last year has really done is allow HE to talk to FE and FE to talk to schools, and for those conversations to start happening in terms of pedagogy and in terms of tools and in terms of what we can expect young people to know at any given stage of their education. I've been having some quite interesting conversations with colleagues in the HE sector, saying that they're looking at the way that schools have managed some of this online delivery and the kind of scale of it, but also this community building and this real focus on trying to maintain that sense of belonging, and actually saying we want a piece of that. We want to learn from our school colleagues how that's happening. So I think the potential to learn, as Sheila's just put in the chat, cross sector is huge from the last year actually, and that people maybe these institutions now aren't quite so siloed in their own little bubbles. And have that opportunity to talk across.
Yeah, and I think in the kind of early days of the first lockdown, we in the kind of school sector were looking to colleagues in the HE sector very much in terms of perhaps having kind of more experience of the online. But yes, now there's this real cross-fertilization, and it's almost like education has just become one thing in a way that perhaps it always has been, but it's just really obvious that we are all doing the same thing. We have got so much to learn from each other. Just picking up on the chat, Alistair, thank you very much for the suggestion around the enhanced programme. I didn't know of that. And the suggestion from Chris around linking with RSA. So I think any suggestions like that we would really welcome.
Brilliant. I think, Sarah, should we move to the second part of this session?
Yeah, great.
Just going to jump on Jane's key difference in higher education is we have education technology teams who can support lecturers interested in who trains the teachers in pedagogy and learning design issues. Well, your answer partly, Jane, is us. The Connected Learning Centre, that's very much part of what our bread and butter is, even before the pandemic, has been about using technology effectively across the curriculum. So not just sort of siloed into the computing curriculum, but really how education technology can be an enhancement within the classroom. There aren't as many of us as we would like, I would say, and I think it is different across the country and across different institutions. But I think there are those organisations, and there are versions of us out there doing that support. But you're right. I think that the institutional, in some parts, the institutional size difference when you're looking at universities and HE compared with schools. And Jane, I think that's another really good point, hearing that a lot of teachers have been sort of trained on teams, focused on the technology rather than on the learning. And that is really what the genesis of Blend Ed was in the first place, is this idea that actually at the beginning of the pandemic, there was this stage that we sort of were calling emergency home learning, of we just need everybody to be able to use the thing. We need everybody to be able to use the tech so that something can happen. But actually we're beyond that now. Most teachers have adapted incredibly quickly and can now use Teams or Google or whichever platform it is that the school's chosen. Now we really need to be thinking about how we're making learning in this context effective and how we're using effective pedagogy. So I think absolutely, I think we're in that next stage of what teachers need now, and hopefully that's what we're looking to offer in that space. But as we said, a key component of Blend Ed is educator voice. So now what we would like is your voice, and a chance for you to reflect a little bit as well on what has worked and what hasn't. And we're going to do an activity around that, because I love a practical activity. This is where I fall down on my tech, isn't it? Because I can't help but play. But what we're going to do is we are going to use a Padlet. And that Padlet is set out in a very specific way that I will show you now. So I'll put the link in the chat in a minute. But this Padlet is the greenhouse activity. And what it encourages you to do is have a think about the different tools and approaches that you've used over the course of the last year, and to kind of allocate them to one of these different threads. So you've got the shredder. What did you use that really just didn't work? You gave it a go, gave it your best, wasn't the one, wasn't a winner. Alongside that, you've got the shop window. What did you use that you would shout from the rooftops was amazing and that you would recommend? The greenhouse, what did you try that's got potential, that you still need to grow and develop, but that you really think might work in the long term? Then we've got the pantry. What's here to stay? These are your staples. They might be the really simple things, but what's really working for you, that's staying in your store cupboard to be brought out. And then the last one, which I think is potentially the most interesting. What did you try that was fine for the time? So what did you try that worked when you needed it to, but actually you can sort of say, that was great, and I'm going to say goodbye to it now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share that link in the chat and ask people to go into the Padlet and contribute. You'll also see that you can see the little hearts underneath the posts. That's because I've turned on likes. So if someone else has written something you think, oh, that's what I was going to say, you can just like their post as well. And hopefully what we'll do is kind of very quickly, I'm going to give about 5 to 8 minutes for this, we'll build a picture of what people's development and approaches have been to this remote and blended learning. So I'm going to pop that link in the chat now. Brilliant. That's our 5 minutes. I will leave the Padlet active during the break, so if people do want to contribute, they can. But I'm just going to have a little look through it now and pick out some of the ones that have jumped out or that have been liked a lot. So in that first one, in the shredder, things to get lost, things to go away. Interesting that Microsoft Teams has gone in there, and then we've seen it in other places as well. And I think it just goes to show that it's horses for courses, isn't it? No one tool is right for everyone. I also think that Teams, more than anything else, and other things, other people might agree with this, has updated in really useful ways over the course of the last year. At the beginning of the period, I think I agree. I found it sort of clunky and fairly unusable. But actually, it's got better. It's got better. But I think everyone's got their preferences and their ways of working, and it's not for everyone. So I think that's really interesting. And that using an untested platform, I love that that's sort of come up in the museum as well, the busking my way through a guest lecture. And my goodness, at the beginning of this, we were all busking our way through things. And trying to find our way to having those resources in the best kind of format for the online delivery. Big arguments in our institution and Teams versus Zoom, says Chris. Yes, I think people have got very strong opinions on this, don't they? I guess at the CLC we're a Google organization in general, but we do use kind of all three, dependent on situation. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's finding what the best tool for the job is, and sometimes that's the tool that the people who are delivering are most comfortable with. Moving on, the shop window. I'm loving some of these ideas. Auto captions, yes, absolutely, really, really good. Building those online communities of practice. H5P, excellent. Mentimeter, big fan of Mentimeter. Excerpts toolkits. I have to say, I've never heard of that. Would whoever wrote that post like to share a little bit there?
Hi, can you hear?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, it's got a terrible name. It's hard to pronounce. It's actually Xerti. It's open source, so it's a free tool, and but it does need installed on a server, so you need somebody with a bit of technical skill to install it on a server, but it integrates with Moodle and so on. Quite a big community built around it, but it allows you to, it's template driven, so it allows teachers to create interactive drag and drop, interactive sort of categorization, all sorts of quizzes and things, as well as being really easy to create very engaging resources. And it's got a high accessibility credentials as well. Not perfect, no creation tool is perfect, but the developers have really spent a lot of time on accessibility.
That's really lovely. Thank you for the share there. Great. Uptake was significant. Well, that is a tool that I have not heard of before today, but I will definitely be checking out. Thank you. And I think that also brings in, and what you're sort of saying in the chat as well, about the idea of it being expensive to license all of these different tools, is cost is such a huge factor in kind of how useful a tool can be, in part because it's a limiting factor in education. We haven't got huge amounts of money to spend on things. So it's nice to see some of the free tools cropping up. Great, I love that. Asynchronous activities, yes. Padlet, I love that Padlet's come up, because as you can see, big fan of Padlet. Presenting as a costumed character, love that. It's World Book Day, I think, next week after. We have been talking about potentially doing that. Just going to pull out a couple more. Minecraft is a teaching tool there in the greenhouse. Big fan of using Minecraft, and I think finding those ways of meeting kids where they are as well. What are they using? What are they doing? And how can we go and kind of meet them where they're at? Great. Playing team games online. Keeping that teaching online. Those videos, communities of practice. The other thing that I just wanted to pull out was someone talking about quick video responses, and I think that's one of the things that we found, is that people have been sort of rethinking assessment, rethinking engagement with students. It doesn't all have to be written or in specific pens, but actually the ability to do a quick video or to do a quick voice note has actually kind of made that marking and assessment aspects easier. Flipgrid, Sandra's put in the chat. I'm a huge fan of Flipgrid, and has been quite a kind of one of those nice ways of using video, and kind of the way that it's set up is kind of social media-y a little bit, obviously with limits, and it's designed for education, which is great, but it's again, it's that feel of meeting the students where they are and the kind of software that they're using in their free time.